Today, we're going to learn the secrets behind double-edged swords. Hello everyone, I am Jonathan, also known as the Pc Genie. Now today, we're going to be looking at why some swords have two edges and not just one edge. Now of course, there are valid reasons why people have a single-edged weapon. So if you're looking at something like a machete, you just want something that's robust, reliable. You don't want to be spending double the time sharpening two edges on there. So you just have one, have an edge all the way along, nice and easy, good to maintain. On something like, if you're looking at something such as a katana or a wakizashi, you can even play it quite cleverly. You can do what's called differential tempering. Which is just a fancy way of saying you can make certain parts of the blade harder and certain parts softer. So when I'm looking at the weapon, if I've got just one edge on the front, then I can deliberately make the edge harder so that it'll retain an edge and it won't just deform and squish when it impacts things, like maybe the edge of a shield, another sword, a rock or part of a wall or something if I miss in the chaos of combat. And then you can have the spine, the back, softer, and that makes it more springy, absorbent. It allows it to take that impact in its stride rather than just snap like glass. However, there are reasons to have a two-edged sword, and those are for good reasons. All of them are tactical. So apart from the obvious that, you know, if you're fighting and the edge gets quite worn, you can maybe flip the sword around and ahaha, I've got another edge to use. That's a lot more basic, and surely there's that, but there are other special reasons to use two edges as well. So when I do this, I'm just extending the sword forwards, I'm just in a nice relaxed position, I'm not doing anything crazy, you know, just naturally how anyone would hold a sword. Nice and relaxed, whether I'm using two hands or I'm using one hand, you'll notice, unless I'm really trying to sort of force my hand and try to sort of cause a lot of tension, maybe if I'm doing an impact I might do something nasty to the ligaments and tendons in my wrist and all of that to try to extend the point a lot more, usually I end up at least some sort of diagonal angle, slightly upwards. Now that will happen whether I'm going sort of upwards, maybe if I'm going towards the side I might end up diagonally this way, towards my left or towards my right, all sorts of things like that. So if I'm attacking an opponent, let's say I just do a straight sort of attack from up high and I'm just trying to split their head open. Now of course, if they parry, it ends up like this. Ding! And then there's a diagonal line pointing the sword safely away from their head. So they've blocked it, no harm is done, and they can have an opportunity to riposte in some way. However, if I deliberately use my false edge, I've got a new type of angle. Instead of my hand being able to bend basically this way, I can start to bend my hand this way. Just simply by the fact that the hand is rotated. But of course, when I'm attacking, I need to use this part of the sword, the back of it. So when I attack the same person again, rather than going like that, I end up going like that. Now notice here, I've got this angle. And even if they bind like this, so they've blocked me, I can start to do this. So I can start to stab, or I can cut over their defense. The same thing works when you're attacking sideways on. So if I'm attacking like this, maybe they block me like that, or they block me like that. The point is safely away. However, I can then go engage with the false edge, and I can get myself back online again. Now, beyond that, we also have binds and beats, and other situations where you might want to use the false edge. Now, if for example I try to do something like a thrust, here I am, quite foolishly, I have missed my opponent's head. So I'm actually off to my left, to your right, just a bit too much. Now I could go through the extra effort to turn in, use that true edge, the front edge that is, and then try to slice along. Yes, but it takes time, and that might be enough time to react and do something to parry or riposte. So instead, if I've done that thrust, I can immediately use the back edge on their neck or their head or somewhere like that and slice. So rather than going 1, 2, 3, I can just go 1, 2. Done. And notice how I've saved myself time and tempo, as in combat time for a person to react and do something else, just by having that double edge. Same thing applies when doing other items, like for example beats, like I said. So let's say my opponent just wants to chop my head off. They just want to go BAM! And then cleave me in twain. Now when they do that, I might decide to beat the sword down. So I just go BAM! Hit the sword to the floor, and then I've got them bound, their sword's there, I'm keeping my sword on top of it. Now I could, again, spend extra time, turn and cut them. Yes, that is a possibility. However, with my double edge, again the same thing applies. Beat down, cut up, in one fluid motion. I'm not wasting time turning my blade around because the edge isn't where I want it to be. Even though always cutting with the true edge and cutting in a natural body motion like this and this, or such ways as this, it's always going to produce the most powerful results. But in a chaotic situation where it's a life and death fight or a tactical duel in a skill contest, you're not going to be given that opportunity by your opponent. They're not going to be sat there going, okay, yeah, come on, line up your perfect strike. They're going to be moving around. They're going to be trying to defend themselves. They might even be trying to attack you back instead of considering their defense. So then, you need to make sure that whatever you're going to do next takes as little time as possible. So hence, having a double edge saves on time doing that. I can even use the double edge when people are actually, causing me to improvise. So let's say I am starting with something like a true edge attack. So I'm doing something like this. I cut forwards. Great. Now, the opponent is doing pretty much the same thing as I've just said. So I'm trying to cut, and then they beat the sword down. Now yes, I could pull back and then cut in with that true edge again. But, again, quicker, or for certain different opportunities around their parries and arrest, as I explained earlier, I might deliberately allow the false edge to be used. So then I cut, I'm beat down, I go around, cut in with the false edge, and you'll notice there, I accidentally did another thing that you can do with the false edge. So one thing you can do is, if you want to attack multiple times, whether you're testing a defense, whether you're doing deliberate attacks, and you expect you're probably going to be parried or avoided the first time, you can, rather than going 1, 2, or 1, 2, you can instead use the false edge, either afterwards or before. So I can, for example, start with the false edge, maybe I'm starting here, and I go 1, 2. So notice, all of these things are optional, and there's no perfect tactic to defeat every opponent, but when I've got 2 edges instead of just 1, I have a lot more options, a lot more choices, and a lot more that the opponent has to think about when I'm fighting them. So that is why the false edge is really good. So hence, you see a lot of techniques, and I forgot to mention it in my last video when I was talking about the basic cuts by Fiore. Certain attacks are often recommended to be done with the false edge. So I mentioned with the Mizani, that's this type of horizontal cut. When you're cutting back, they don't actually recommend you cut like that, using the front edge. They actually recommend you use the back edge. And same thing with certain things like the Sotani, which is the cut upwards. You can indeed start cutting upwards with the true edge, the front edge. That's true. But you can also cut with the back edge. So I can do something like that. And notice how the dynamics change. If I start with the point backwards, maybe it's easier to cut with the true edge. So back points backward, cut with the true edge, backwards, cut with the true edge. Or even here, points back. However, when I'm starting the point forwards, I'm using the back edge more easily. Again, in those types of positions, you can actually choose to do the opposite. I can start with the point backwards and sweep up with the back edge rather than use the true edge. I can start with the point forwards and then cut with the true edge still. Again, these aren't set rules, but when you've got two edges, you've got a lot of options, and the more options you have, the more confusing it is for your opponent, which is always a good thing. If they can predict what you're going to do, they're going to prepare against it and defeat you. So that is why people like to have not one, but two edges on their swords. See you later.